We did 800 grand worth of sales in 1 week. So it was just this bang.
You're unethically targeting a person that you're not really interested whether they can or can't achieve the things that you're claiming they can achieve.
I very rapidly ended up with a business doing 4 million a year. You have to either do that now or you go out of business.
Every time I see a book now that is a bestseller, I always think of your blank book. Does that annoy Dan?
It's an easy system to hack. The Amazon bestseller, the title doesn't mean a lot.
I wasn't even shortlisted.
Well, there you go. That's a higher bar to go for.
I should have been in for like the short business book of the year, definitely. There's no one that's written a short
the blank business book of the year.
We're back, Series 2, thanks to our sponsor Shafrazul, who's also fighting Contrapreneurs and fake gurus. Go check his channel on YouTube, link in the description.
On today's episode of the podcast, we've got Dan Priestley, who is an Aussie, author and co-founder and CEO of Dent. So thanks for joining us, Daniel. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
We met at a Success Resources event in 2018, which went on to change my life. And that was from that event that I created the Contrapreneur formula.
Wait a second, did we meet for like a minute?
Yeah, we'll say met. I mean, I was in the stage, like I was watching you while you were on stage, and you were one of the only
mentor.
Oh, well, we've not had a photo taken together yet. So if we can have a photo taken together, and I can say I've been mentored by Dan Priestley.
Brilliant.
He taught me how to become a millionaire in 90 days. But it was at that event, really, where you were one of only two people that didn't sell from the stage. And that's what sort of impressed me, because it was a shit show for 48 hours, if you want my honest opinion. So first things first, you're an entrepreneur, business owner. You had some success early in your career. How did you get involved in this world?
So my background, from 19 to 21, I was part of a startup, and I was employee number 3. We grew to 60 people, 6 million of revenue in Australia. And I got like yourself, I went through as an employee in the startup world. So I kind of saw everything unfold and how it unfolds and all of that sort of stuff. 2 years in, I went to my boss and asked for some shares in the company and said, can I be a shareholder? And I caught him at the wrong time. And he basically said, if you want shares in the company, you've got to go start your own company. So I went off and started something very similar. And I launched that business, and it was very successful. It went from like 0 to $1 million in its first year, or about 1.3 million. And then we got up to millions, like 10.7 million in a few years later. So it was kind of like a very fast growth business, very young company, lots of people under 30, very hard, work hard, play hard culture. So that was my start in business.
A lot of people look at what we talk about on our channel and say we're anti get rich quick, but you're saying there that you grew a business to like $1 million in revenue in the first year. Some people would argue that was get rich quick. I get that myself when people say your business was only 2.5 years old before you sold it. But again, my background was in startups for 6 years before I as an employee. So I learned the sort of highs and lows of startup life. I did my learning almost on someone else's time. Do you think that's important then for anyone that is looking to be genuinely successful and get into startup business and start a business of their own?
I tell people all the time that probably the best thing they could do, especially if they want an education, is go join a company with less than 10 employees. In this country, especially in the UK, it seems like there's a lot of people who either believe you work for government, like the NHS or government, teaching, or you work for corporate, one of the big FTSE kind of companies, or you go and start your own business and you're self-employed. And it's like there's 5.7 million small businesses that already exist. There's actually huge room to go and work for a year or two in a company, a fast growth company. In the UK, there's about 40,000 companies that grow at 20% or more per year. There's a lot of awards lists and all of that sort of stuff. I would always encourage people, go and work for a company that's already doing things, that's already kind of up and running, but small enough where you get time with the founder, small enough where you can see what's happening in the company and that you kind of have a full perspective. Normally a company, certainly less than 50 people, often less than 10 people, you'll get a great entrepreneurial experience riding shotgun and getting an experience of what it's like in an entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah, I found that doing it that way, I got to see all aspects. It was my first exposure to doing marketing. Some of it I did myself. I was sat with the people, or you helping design some of the marketing ideas. even you were doing events, you were doing face-to-face events, you had to do meetings. Yeah, it was almost like you take every role within that business, especially if you're maybe employee 1, 2, or 3. How did you end up coming over to the UK then?
My business was essentially event marketing and roadshow business. So what we were doing is roadshowing events. So we had a roadshow for a software company. We had a roadshow for a financial planning company. We had a roadshow for we actually had a DVD vending machine business franchise that people could buy a DVD. Terribly timed right before Netflix and all of that kind of took off. So we would basically do launch events and roadshow events and product launch and product description and product explainer events. So we'd roadshow that up and down Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. And then one of the deals that we took on was to roadshow a franchise. So this company had succeeded in getting its first $2 million worth of franchisees sold, and they wanted to grow their I think they had probably 20 or 30 franchisees. They wanted to go up to 200. And we actually got them there in 1 year, and it was a very fast growth business. They had hit their critical mass of licensees, of franchisees. 200 people was about all they could train and manage, and that all the Australian market could absorb. So there was a natural exit point. So I did a deal where they could actually buy a lot of our marketing assets off of us, and that they could take on some of the key members of the team and all of that sort of stuff. It was a mini exit, you could say. It wasn't an exit on the scale that you would imagine for a $10 million business, but it was enough for me to be comfortable at 25, and that I had enough time to think, what do I want to do? What do I want to be up to next? And also just take some time. I'd never traveled really outside of Australia, never been above the equator. So I thought I'd do what most Australians do, which is go to London in 2006 and kind of base myself in London.
Did you get a job in Walkabout?
Get a job in the Walkabout, serve some beers and go snowboarding in Austria and that sort of stuff.
Did you do that?
No, I immediately started a new business in the UK and it took off. So basically, when I was looking at what to do next, I came across a speaker in Australia, a guy called Roger Hamilton, who was talking about personality traits that entrepreneurs have. And basically he had identified these different personality styles of entrepreneurs, and he had kind of like Myers-Briggs testing for entrepreneurs. And I found it really fascinating, and I really liked his books. And when I decided to go to London, I did a deal with Roger where I said, well, we'll run the test and we'll launch you into the UK market, and we'll roadshow you London, Birmingham, Manchester, Milton Keynes, and we'll do a roadshow and we'll do a product launch because I know how to do that. And basically we did I had arrived in June, July. We did a roadshow in September of Manchester, Birmingham, Milton Keynes, London. And we did 800 grand worth of sales in 1 week. So it was just this bang, where suddenly we're in the market and we're doing really well. And then that kind of grew up to about 2 million for the year. And then I met another guy called John DiMartini, who was talking about personal development, leadership development, speed reading, all sorts of stuff like that. I really kind of warmed to his content and his view of the world. He was very much into stoicism, and I was into stoicism. And I said, okay, well, we'll do some leadership trainings in London as well. And we launched that, and then that did another 2 million. So I very rapidly ended up with a business doing 4 million a year, with two speakers and two presenters, and basically what was meant to be taking some time off immediately turned into another fast growth business.
And was that Dent?
That was a business called Triumphant Events. We rebranded to Dent 5 years ago. Before that, we were the Key Person of Influence Accelerator. And before that, it was Triumphant Events. So what happened with that is in 2008, 2009, we had the global financial crisis. Personal development, professional development is kind of one of the things that gets hardest hit in a recession. So basically we said it's not going to work. So I cut tight. I said, all right, we're not going to promote that. And then I had an issue with Roger. Roger took on a new business partner in Asia who basically wanted to hardball me and negotiate really difficult terms with me. I went out to Bali to where Roger had a resort, sat down, and there's this new guy there who is this new chief operating officer who sits me down and basically says, look, here's the new deal. And I'm like, no. So I basically just got my back up and walked away and said, I'm not going to have any of that. So I found myself very rapidly having a £4 million a year business the year before to having a business that had no product, had nothing, right? So I went from 4 million to 400,000 in 1 year, had to make a lot of people redundant. And it was just basically I back into startup mode. So around that particular time, I thought, well, what do I know about? What's my skill set? What's my talent? What have I experienced? I know a lot about running events and running campaigns and promotions and those sorts of things. I know a lot about speakers and professional speakers and how much they get paid and what their life is like and all of that. And one thing I'd seen from running so many events was essentially, if you're the key person of influence on the stage, if you're the key person of influence, the Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever, you attract so many, you have such a velocity of opportunities coming to you that you almost can't fail because you have so much coming at you. And the opening line of the book is, there are people who don't chase opportunities chase them. If you're not a key person of influence, your full-time job should be become one or get close to one, because all the good opportunities circle around a very small number of people, and everyone else is basically left with a small number of opportunities and a lot of people chasing them. So I basically said, in that book, Key Person of Influence, your job really, if you want to be in an industry, is to move towards the inner circle and stand out in that industry.
So you think that's essential then for success in business today?
I think there is definitely a dynamic that there's deal flow, and deal flow goes to people who have somewhat of a profile. And if you don't have that profile, you don't have the deal flow. You don't have, like, for example, when you want to grow and scale a business, you need good employees. Good employees want to work with someone who has a profile, who's known in the industry as someone who's got a good brand. Marketing, if you run ads with someone who's a known person, you get you might generate leads for £5 per lead. If someone who doesn't have a profile runs the exact same ad, they might generate leads for £15 to £20 per lead. So essentially what I saw happening is this dynamic that the people who are key people of influence do very, very well. And outside of those circles, it's anyone's guess.
I would say there's like a gray area now, though, because you can appear like a key person of influence overnight. There's people looking for shortcuts to that credibility and authority. Do you think that's a problem?
I think the first key to being a key person of influence for real or legitimately is to try and get a grasp of what it is you actually know. What do you have insights on? What is your backstory? What have you? What can you talk about with some authority? And doing a bit of a deep dive into what you genuinely can add value in the world. Now, once you've got a good grasp that you do have something to add value and that you can add value to others and you can solve problems and there's something that you've earned the right to talk about, then at that point, there's the functional skills of delivering that. There's the functional part of having those skills. Let's say you're a photographer and you've got great functional skills as a photographer. And then there's a different set of skills, which is around promoting yourself as a brand and actually being seen as having good skills and being seen to be a good photographer. So at some point you have to make a switch. You have to say, okay, I'm good at what I do. I now need to let people know that I'm good at what I do.
Yeah. Do you think there's a problem with people pretending that they're good at what they do, or they appear like they're good at what they do, but when you dig below the surface? Yeah,
I think you've really exposed that. You've exposed that there are Contrapreneur formulas and tricks, which you really well outlined in your videos, and essentially there's behaviors that are essentially preying on people who are weak, or crafting an unethical approach to the market. I think too that there's a distinction that sometimes someone might actually be really good at what they do, but they might be selling to someone who it's not transferable to them. So for example, there are property entrepreneurs who maybe they do have really good insights about property, and if you were to talk to someone who's earning £80,000 a year and has a great credit record, and they already have a few assets behind them, if you were to talk to that type of person, you could transfer some of those property skills into that person. They could then get a loan, buy a property, renovate it, add value to it in some way as a side project, and they could potentially earn more money and do quite well from that. But then if you try and talk to someone who has literally no money, no credit score, nothing behind them, no ability to influence anyone with money, no network, now you're sitting there saying, well, maybe the skill set works, but it only really works for a certain type of person. And if you're then telling someone else that they can do it too, then you enter the world of being unethical. Yeah,
that's what I wanted to discuss with you, really, because I know being on that stage, and you would have seen some of the speakers that were talking there, and I mean, I don't want to name names unless you're happy to name names, but there were some people there that were literally, in my mind, selling to anybody, and they were selling them a dream that these people weren't capable of reaching, and the fact that they had to pay for this course on a credit card, or they didn't have the finances. That was the problem. It's like you're unethically targeting a person that you're not really interested whether they can or can't achieve the things that you're claiming they can achieve.
Yeah, it's worse. It's actually worse than that as well, because the business model that a lot of those sort of scenarios work on is that the first sale is split with the promoter. So essentially, when someone spends £2,000, £1,000 goes to the promotion, and £1,000 goes to running an event that might be 3 or 4 days. And if you kind of crunch the numbers, running an event for 3 or 4 days and trying to deliver some sort of amazing value on 50% of the revenue, that doesn't work either, and that's not profitable either. So essentially, the business model works on a further upsell. So you then have to go from, making a $2,000 sale to another $5,000 sale or $6,000 sale or whatever. So it's a pretty toxic mess as far as that business model is concerned.
Do you think that industry is going to get regulated at some point? Because it seems to be a lot more people are vocal about those events now and what happens there. And it seems to be, especially if you look at YouTube now, there's a few channels like mine, sort of the anti-guru channels, if you wanted to call them that. So do you think there are things that need to be done in that sector?
It's quite shocking that it's not regulated, because essentially you're talking about investment products. It's very clever in the sense that it's an education. So it's talking about real estate, but it's real estate education and blah, blah, blah. But essentially you're encouraging people to use, debt instruments and all sorts of things like that. It's quite shocking that there is no regulation about educating people on pretty, life-changing decisions that they might make. There certainly should be some form of regulation or body or code of ethics or something like that, of course.
Yeah. Do you think it's like you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the ethics? Do you think it's the intent of the person on the stage? Because I often explain the Contrapreneur formula to people, especially in the comments on YouTube, and it's not necessarily that formula works. That process as a sales process works. It's very powerful. It's when you're using unethical or fake examples of it, I find that's where the problem is to me. It's like, yes, scarcity works if it's genuine scarcity.
I think you probably need some more objectivity than just purely the intent, because a lot of these people actually think they have great intent. And they talk, they've talked themselves into believing that they're changing people's lives. The human mind can almost justify any behavior or anything. So I think you need something more objective than just what their intention is, because they'll probably be able to get it, to feel good about it.
This generation of entrepreneurs coming through, they don't look at, say, like I'm 36, I don't know how old you are, Dan, but it's like Richard Branson. It's like those were real entrepreneurs and business owners to us. But nowadays it's whoever's on YouTube and they're like almost YouTube business people.
Yeah,
like celebrity business people. It's like Grant Cardone's one of those people I would put in that bracket as well. I think and any criticism of those people, it's just, your haters, shut them down, send their loyal fans and their thousands of followers to go and troll other people's accounts that dare speak up about them.
Look, I mean, that is the internet. The internet's highly polarizing. There are people who absolutely adore Trump and absolutely hate Trump, and the internet, essentially polarizes people because you end up with two extremes. I was watching Mark Zuckerberg give a Facebook Live the other day, and you've got like comments basically saying, you are satanic, you are, the worst person on the planet. And then there are other people saying, Mark, you are the best person ever. You are the most inspirational person on the planet right now. And it was interesting, just in a Facebook feed of people watching, there's only 26,000 people watching, but you've literally got the hard extreme of you're the devil and the other extreme of you're the second coming of Jesus. And it's just like, the internet does polarize people. I think there's a deeper issue as well that a lot of young people at the moment don't feel that they have a path to success, or they don't have a path to doing well in life. There's been a lot of disruption, and in many ways, these YouTube celebrities, it feels attainable. It feels like this is a person I could follow and I could learn something from. And they see maybe they've got their flaws, but they're at least offering me a path. They're offering me a way to succeed. In the church days of religion, religion had its flaws, and they were also asking for 10% of everything you earn. And people went along with religion just fine. So, it's kind of a bit of a modern day religion.
It's interesting you say that. So your advice then, if someone is looking to invest in personal development, or they are looking to invest in themselves because they want to become financially free or learn skills, whether it be social media marketing or any of these things that sometimes we talk about on my channel, what would you say is the sort of limit someone should spend?
If you look at the greatest companies in the world, they spend something like 5% on learning and development and 5% on research and development. It's around 10% is what they spend on L&D and R&D. So when you go too far above that, you're probably in the realms of wishful thinking. You're probably hoping for some sort of transformational results that is unlikely. So, for
you definitely wouldn't recommend someone would go into debt then. Like you pay on a credit card to get this course, or.
Well, I mean, that also depends. If you're earning £80,000 a year and you've got a credit card and you're quite comfortable putting £3,000 on a credit card, it's contextual, right? It's within the context of your overall situation. But certainly, if you're broke and you've got no money, I mean, it's really hard. I can actually empathize that. If my advice is go and start at the bottom and work your way up, I mean, that also doesn't feel very empowering for a lot of people at the moment, because there's many people at the moment who have actually tried to get jobs, plenty of jobs, and they've submitted 40 applications to different jobs, and they've done that path and it hasn't led them anywhere, and they're frustrated. And I can kind of get that to an extent. When the chips are down, almost any even risky behavior doesn't feel risky, because it's like, what have I got to lose? I've got nothing to lose. I personally began my first business on a credit card. I took a huge risk. The reason I kind of hesitated around that, because I was just thinking personally, I worked for 2 years for John, and he put a lot of, because I was traveling around, I put a lot of expenses on my credit card, and then he would clear it when I got back to the office. And within every month I cleared the credit card. And at 21, I had a $27,000 credit limit on my credit card, because I'd been so diligent at putting expenses on and paying them off, and putting them on and paying them off. And when I started my very first company, I actually couldn't have started it if I didn't put a lot of the expenses, including a $7,000 ad in the newspaper, on my credit card. So that actually gave me my start. And I didn't have any access to any other capital, or I hadn't thought it through. But I basically, I did start on a credit card.
We spoke sort of off camera before, and it was a good example you gave about selling a £250,000 Ferrari. Like, selling a £250,000 Ferrari to someone that can afford that isn't bad, but if you're trying to force that on someone that can only afford a Nissan Micra, then you're probably not a very nice salesperson.
Yeah, it's all contextual. Like, for example, someone who offers a property development course. I know someone who offers a property development or property related course, service, management service, and it's about £60,000. But the condition of spending that £60,000 is that the people who he works with have a net worth of they have a liquid £750,000 to start with, and then he's working with wealthy, sophisticated investors, and he has a great network of hundreds of them, 200 of them, who have actually bought into a long-term plan with him to build and develop a property portfolio. And then the company does a lot of the management, the sourcing, all of those sorts of things. But you're working with people who have £750,000 to begin with of liquid assets. Now, in that situation, it's completely ethical to charge £60,000 for a property-related program, let's call it.
Yeah.
But if you were to say, I'm going to try and push that upon someone who really, hasn't got the starting point to make that strategy work, it's the same as like buying a McDonald's franchise. McDonald's actually won't let you buy a McDonald's franchise unless you can put down 50% of the $1 million franchise fee up front. And yes, McDonald's makes money, and yes, it's a good business and all of those sorts of things, but you have to be a certain type of person to be allowed a franchise. There's just not a lot of things that are massive, easy money. Like even a McDonald's, right? A McDonald's is about, on average, they do about £2 million worth of revenue per McDonald's and make about £150,000 of profit for the franchisee.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's shocking, actually. Those numbers have surprised me.
Yeah.
I saw you tweet something a couple of weeks ago that said, after an 11-year bull run with wealth flowing to the top, how are so many companies broke after 2 months of disruption? Like, why do you think that is? Because there's some big names that have struggled with lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic. Why do you think so many look successful and look like they're built on rock when the reality is they're built on sand? I
think systemically, the economy that we've built in the 2000s is to, especially for large companies, is to provide safety nets when things go bad. So therefore, CEOs of very large companies, they're under so much pressure to produce quarterly results. And then they're also under so much pressure to put capital to use. It's almost seen as a weakness to have cash reserves. There's jokes by Jeff Bezos where he said, profit is what you've got left when you've run out of ideas. And, he's setting the tone that essentially if you're making a profit or if you've got cash lying around, then you're obviously not a very smart individual. So that's been very much the kind of the backdrop of the last 20 years. And then when things do go horribly wrong, the government comes running in and says, hey, we'll do bailouts and we won't, we'll save the businesses because we don't want to lose the jobs. And it actually, from a very kind of like game theory perspective, CEOs are doing what essentially the game says you should do. And it's a very unfair system. It's a very
it's not fair. It's not fair, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's tragically unfair to the, it's almost like the wealthy have forgotten that having a healthy, functioning middle class is actually what makes their life work as well. It's what makes a business work. If you don't have a healthy, go off to a sub-Saharan African country and try and run your business. It's not going to work because you don't have a functioning economy, a functioning middle class of people to sell stuff to. And everyone thinks, there's no value in actually developing good jobs and economic growth at the middle. And we're going to massively shoot ourselves in the foot.
Do you think a lot of businesses now having employees working from home and furloughed as well will change a lot of their systems and processes so they can do more online and take advantage of technology?
You have to. There's no should you or could you, or you either do that now or you go out of business. The world has very rapidly moved to a different way of running, and you have to, like a surfer has to adapt to the changing conditions of the weather. You have to, change your way you're running your business.
I saw you do a article on LinkedIn about the 50,000 bounce back loan that's available from the government. A lot of people will be watching this that are either in SMEs, business owners, entrepreneurs. What would you recommend that they do to spend that £50,000 on if they could get it?
The key with taking on debt is that you have to spend it on something that you will have something to show for 3, 4, 5 years from now. The way I look at deployment of capital like that, especially debt, is that are we going to have anything to show for it? So, for example, developing good quality systems in the business, having some IT systems, you might spend 10 or 15 grand, building out some capability within the business that you don't otherwise have, and then you'll still have that 5 years from now. Or you might create some content, good quality content that is going to, explainer videos and all of that sort of stuff. You might spend 4 or 5 grand on that. so there's all sorts of things that you're looking for. You're looking for things that will provide an economic benefit to the business and have some longevity to them.
We had crypto man rigs. What should they spend it on? Good question.
Or as a general
animated explainer videos from Iron Productions.
Yeah, well, that is actually a content asset. So, and if they do good quality animated explainer videos, in many cases that takes the load off of a salesperson, or it takes.
I'd use it on growth. Really, there's things there that you couldn't necessarily do. I know personally, I would buy an asset with it that I could either rent out, generate income, then also to cover the cost of paying the loan back. Weirdly, we had some crypto mining rigs because we did an experiment mining cryptocurrency for the last 18 months.
Yep.
Shit experiment. Don't do it is my advice if anyone's watching this. However, we put 2 of the rigs up for sale on eBay. We were dead transparent. We told the people that bought it from us that, watch our video. They actually have made no money unless you can produce your own electricity. It's pointless. And we've sold 2 of them, and they use their bounce back loan to buy our crypto mining rigs. That would not be my advice to anybody watching this. Do not buy crypto mining rigs with your bounce back loan. Blockchain technology is interesting. I know you've talked a lot about AI and machine learning. So should businesses be aware of stuff like that?
I do think that people need to be aware that there is a lot of great technology that's coming through, and it's starting to work, and it's starting to integrate with other technology. And if you believe that your business will just completely be able to function 5 years from now without considering the broader landscape that you operate in, you're probably very much mistaken. There is very highly disruptive technology coming to every industry. I think one of the big things that's going to happen as a result of COVID is I think blue collar jobs are going to come back to closer to the consumer markets, and white collar jobs are going to be exported to developing markets. So what happened for manufacturing jobs in the 70s, 80s, 90s is going to happen to white collar jobs. Because what happens is first big companies, KPMG, for example, they're going to sit there and go, oh, everyone can work from home. And everyone will go, oh, that's great. I love working from home. How cool is this? I'm working from home. And for a year, everyone will be like, oh, this is so great working from home. And eventually someone at the top will go, hey, wait a second. If none of these people need to be in London or the UK, why don't we have them in the Philippines?
Yeah.
And we're going to see a lot of big jobs go decimating. I think too, the other thing too is people are going to move out of big cities because the name of the game for the last 20 or 30 years was get yourself close to a big city. And that's where all the action is. But now the action's not in a big city, and it provides a big expense that doesn't necessarily add a huge amount of value to you.
Yeah. So do you think people, any trends over the next 10 years that businesses should be looking at? If you definitely say it's AI and creating assets that are
well, when I say looking at, paying attention to, being aware of, but the vast majority of businesses don't have the capability to be thinking about AI or developing AI. They need to be piggybacking on someone who does AI. Yeah. So for example, if you set up a Facebook shop right now, which just got launched, Facebook's doing the AI. It's actually figuring out what is the best way to present that shop to the world. And it's kind of reorganizing things based on the way people click, and it's kind of learning about the marketplace for you. Now, if you're a small retailer who's just setting up on the high street and you're not putting your products on a Facebook shop as well, then essentially you're just hoping for the best with people who walk past the shop with, foot traffic, as opposed to leveraging AI that Facebook has created. But the vast majority of businesses should not really be trying to understand the inner workings of AI or machine learning. They should be aware that they need to be piggybacking on that. They need to be thinking about who does understand AI and are they offering any solutions for me?
And those that do will probably succeed in the sector, and those that don't will probably die.
Yeah, well, it's if you look at, it was only 2010 that we rolled out the 4G networks, and 4G combined with smartphones and GPS totally transformed many different industries. The way that we bank, the way that we meet a romantic partner, the way we catch a cab, all of that got changed just by the rollout of 4G and 4G and GPS and smartphones. So, these technologies are massively disruptive. And within 10 years, pretty much every black cab driver is sitting there saying, where'd my industry go? and mortgage brokers, and all sorts of people who were kind of broking financial products. Suddenly that stuff is just freely available on an app. So it's important to be aware that you do have to innovate. You do have to kind of at least pick some coattails to ride on, technology wise.
Cool. Now I went to LinkedIn and told people you were coming on, and I've got some questions from LinkedIn. Am I all right to go through some of these with you? Sort of like, I would say quick fire.
Yep, let's go through it.
It's a statement really from Adam Sugden. He says, Mike, you've really destroyed the badge of honor of having an Amazon bestseller. And Daniel promotes the importance of having a book. Every time I see a book now that is a bestseller, I always think of your blank book. Does that annoy Dan?
No, not really. I think it's an easy system to hack. The Amazon bestseller title doesn't mean a lot. It's nice to do it. Look, for a lot of our authors that do a launch, it's nice to do a great day of launch where they launch the book. People buy it, their friends and their networks buy it and support it. They often do a 99p Kindle release or something like that. And I think it's a nice moment for someone who's put the effort into a book to see a little bit of validation that it goes to the top of their chart. And I think, a book is typically a 6 to 9 month project. It's a lovely way to finish that project. I don't think it means anything in the broader world anymore. There's the category bestseller on Amazon, and I think it's lovely for the author to achieve that category bestseller as a way of kind of almost an end point for the 9 months of work they've put into the book, and a beginning point of having their book online.
Ours was 1 hour's worth of work.
You did it very rapidly, which is. Do you
know what? I applied, or we put our book in for the Business Book Awards, and you guys sponsored that, and I wasn't even shortlisted.
Well, there you go. That's a higher bar to go for.
Well, I should have been in for like the short business book of the year. Definitely, there's no one that's written a short
blank business book of the year.
Yeah, so I should win some awards. So next year, Daniel, I better be on stage either presenting an award or winning an award for the shortest business book of the last decade.
Happen.
Yeah, no. Right. So I've got the next one is great book and great guy.
Book. It's a blank.
You know what? There are 4 steps in there, and it was the 4 steps I did to get the book to #1. So, I got a lot of hate from an actual book coach.
Look, by the way, I think it's worth acknowledging that, yes, there are people who put out, really terrible books and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of the people in the Business Book Awards, they have actually put, enormous amount of effort and they've put a lot of themselves into the book. So
it goes back to that thing that we said, isn't it? It's, the genuine people that are authentic and they're trying to deliver value. And then there's those that are trying to
because
fake credibility.
You guys got in contact saying, can we do something with the book awards? And I thought, it's not really appropriate. These people have genuinely put a lot of effort into their books. And I don't want to cheapen the moment for them to sort of say, oh, well, it's all bullshit. There are ways to bullshit any system. But, for the vast majority of people who would be in the Business Book Awards, they're probably leveraging 20, 30 years of experience, and they've poured themselves into creating a quality book. So I just didn't want to put you on the same stage.
Yeah, that's fine. I've got one from Jamie Dixon. He says, it's interesting that you mentioned that Daniel didn't sell from the stage. Are you surprised that more entrepreneurs don't see the value of just giving value instead of going down the entrepreneur formula route?
Yes, 100%. I mean, if I was giving advice to entrepreneurs, right, I would say there's actually a lot more money in doing the right thing by the right people, helping good people go to great, slowing the whole process down, finding the right people, and actually doing a good, offering a good service to someone who's going to actually be able to use it. And long term, 5-10 years, 5-10 years later, you will end up with a brand, you'll end up with a good business, you'll end up with referrals and recommendations, and it's just a much better path to actually deliver good value and trust that smart people will respect that, like that, and then it'll come back to you.
I've got one here. Weirdly, there's 2 people here on this post that claim to be from the same members club in London that you're part of. I don't want to know what goes on in there. Members aren't allowed to talk about what happens behind closed doors, are you? But one of them that I met is Carl Reeder. I don't know if you know Carl.
Yeah, I know of Carl. Yeah, I've met him at the club.
And he once told me that his book was really a great business card. That's how he viewed having his book. It was a way to give something to someone that's tangible. They'd take it away and they'd kind of get in touch with him at a later date. So that's another good way of looking at a book, I suppose.
There's the publishing industry itself is originally built on the idea that authors promote books, and kind of the strategy I think is more relevant for entrepreneurs is that books promote authors and books promote businesses. So if you give away 1,000 books to the right people, they read the book, they like the content inside the book, and then they come back and see you and they want to do business with you. So a book being a business card is not a bad analogy.
Yeah, I've got one here. This is from Peter Lewis, who's a business coach. He said, having started several businesses with just a credit card and an idea, what gave you the confidence that the venture would work out? So what gave you the confidence to put it on a credit card?
It was doing it for 2 years for a boss. So working in 2 years in a startup, the second year was actually running a division within the business and having pretty much full autonomy over most of the decisions within that division. So I ran a $750,000 business within a business. And it was the experience. In the same way, how do you get the confidence to ride a motorbike? Well, you start riding a motorbike in safe environment, and then you kind of build up your confidence. So it was not there was no trick to it. It was just having a little bit of experience doing it before. And also probably a little bit of naivety of youth. 22 years old, you feel like you're pretty bulletproof.
I've got one here from Steve Mark, who said, you've said an absolute banger of a quote, which was stop consuming, start creating.
Yeah.
Do you believe that? Well, explain what that is.
Do I believe that it's a banger of a quote?
Yeah. Do you believe it's a banger of a quote?
I do believe it's a banger of a quote.
You need to get it on your wall. I self-quote myself on all the walls in this office. We've got Mike Winnet quotes everywhere. You're probably not that much of an idiot though, no?
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people spend a lot, like it really doesn't matter how much you're consuming. Ultimately, a business is what you create. So I think if you've got time to listen to a podcast, go and create your own podcast. If you've got time to read books, go write a book. If you've got time to watch YouTube videos, go create some YouTube videos. You'll always learn more and earn more if you're in the process of creating rather than consuming.
And I've got last one really. I'll do two. I'll do one of my own. I've got Karen King says, I remember seeing Daniel at Success Resources show in London 2018. Who does he think was the worst speaker at that event? His are, if you want his options, JT Fox, who, that's my answer, by the way. He's probably the worst person I've ever seen talk live. Or was it Sandy? They were his two worst speakers of the event. Was Sandy or JT Fox? Who do you think was the worst, or do you? No comment.
Look, I typically turn up before speaking, and I leave straight after I talk. I've heard speakers in the background saying pretty horrendous things, and I can see that they're using manipulative language. And it's one way or another. It's I mean, either of those speakers has been referred to as manipulative, and it's not great speakers. I personally do I turn up, I deliver my talk, and I head home.
And I was just the final one then. So this is like a grey area, and I know there'll be some people that and I said to you off camera as well. There's some people that say that you sort of do the similar events, those types of things. So what makes what you do different? So Dent, what you do with people that come to you and want you to help them become a key person of influence. What is it that you do differently that separates you from the bad guys in this industry?
Well, as I said, there's nothing inherently wrong with running a big event. And there's some really great big events. I've been to phenomenal big events with great speakers and learned a lot, and actually, some of them, I flew to Ireland and did a great tech conference one where they had Elon Musk, and they had, great speakers, all sorts of trends and that sort of stuff. And I think it was like 400 euros for 2 days. And it was just awesome. I think what makes us a bit different is we do an interview process before becoming a client. So the only thing that people can do as a result of coming to our events is schedule an interview with one of our team. One of the things that we're looking for is, do you have existing revenues to leverage? Do you have an existing business to go for? or were you previously a fairly high earner in your career and now you're transitioning to business? I think the key is not necessarily what you're selling, but it's the way you're selling it and who you're selling it to. So, for example, there's this guy who recently popped up into one of our groups, and he was like asking people, should I do KPI? And it's like, well, that's not about KPI. That's about you, whether you think you should do it. But I came in and I said, what's your existing revenue? And he said, I'm just starting out. And I said, well, you absolutely shouldn't do KPI because it's too soon. And he said, should I do your startup accelerator, which is called the Threshold Accelerator, which is a focus on threshold? And I think my direct quote to him was, you can, on the condition that you know that it's a low chance of succeeding past that threshold. It's a lot of work and very minimal payoff in the short term. And if you're happy to proceed on those types of terms, then great, come and work with us. Because the same thing that we tell all people, which is if you look at the Wright brothers getting a plane off the ground, they put years and years into getting a plane that would fly 2 minutes in the air. And then from that, you then end up with an airline industry 30 years later that makes a lot of money. But those first few, that first couple of minutes of lighter than air flight was incredible blood, sweat, and tears. When you look at most people getting that first £100,000 of revenue or that first 85,000 of revenue, there's a disproportionate, difficult amount of work that goes into achieving that first breakthrough in business. If you can hit 85,000 in revenue, you're probably halfway to 250,000 because you've actually laid good, strong foundations.
You've done the hard work already.
And at 85,000, you're probably not pulling much money out of the business at all. You might be pulling your basic living expenses out of the business at 85,000. And then you're going to pretty quickly put it back into hiring someone or putting a system in place. So I've essentially, what makes us different is we're quite honest about that initial phase. And we work on the principle that it's a lot easier to make someone who's good into someone who's great than to fix someone who's broken. So most of our clients have had 15, 20 years experience in their industry. They're ready to write a book because they've got the experience to write a book. They're very good at what they do. It's just time to actually tell more people about that.
Do you think if more of these people that were selling sort of assistance or business accelerator courses made that clear and did the due diligence at the beginning, it would have they would grow to be a better business? In
fairness, there's a lot of people who do that. Like there's like McKinsey and Company, they are consultants to the world's biggest companies, and they, Accenture, they come in and they work with Vodafone and all that sort of stuff. Like there is, and then everything in between. There's always going to be a bottom layer. There's always going to, no matter what, there will always be a group of 20, 30 people selling to the absolute bottom, that, sell the dream and all that sort of stuff. My personal preference is that it's a very, very hard slog. If I was talking to anyone who is going to get into business improvement space, you're going to have a very, very hard time getting the very bottom layer to succeed. And what people expect of you for $2,000, for many people, if you're taking their last $2,000 or $2,000 they don't have, they're going to expect the world for $2,000, for £2,000. And if you can't deliver the world for £2,000, they're going to make a very nasty review about you online. So, it's not a place you want to necessarily be.
We know that with our own products. We say the same thing. It's the people that pay the least actually are the most difficult to deal with, because number one, a lot of times they want a lot more for their money. They expect more, and it's easier to deal. Sometimes it's easier to sell something for £200,000 people that have got that money than it is to sell something with no money for £20.
Definitely.
And the very, very last thing, you might have already touched on it with the book. You've seen my work. Obviously, we talk on Twitter sometimes. Do you think there's anything that we will disagree on?
I think probably the only thing I'd disagree with you on, or I would mention, is that there needs to be some sort of a pathway of hope for. There's a lot of disaffected young people. So the toxic nature of what's really going on is that society is not really offering a lot to young men, in particular, and that if you're an academically gifted young man, then there's probably a lot of places that you can go and you can get a job at a law firm, etc. But there's a large group of young men who historically would have gotten a job in a factory, in a coal mine, in the military, and they would have had a life path. They would have known that if they actually just did a good job, bought a house, had children, took out a life insurance plan, all of that, they would end up with having a reasonable life, and they would actually feel good about life. And what we now have is this weird society where everyone can look at Instagram and see people with Ferraris and jets, and so they feel very dissatisfied with just their smaller lot in life. They feel that unless they're having Ferraris and jets, then they're not successful. And also a lot of people are very unsure about what path that you're meant to take in life. So the Contrapreneurs that you're talking about are giving people an unmet need where they're sitting there going, well, what do I do? What am I meant to do? How do I actually get out of debt? How do I get a job that I'm proud of? How do I do something that feels meaningful and purposeful and that I feel like I'm getting ahead in some way? And what's missing from your channel, in my opinion, if I can, you've asked for some feedback, but what's missing is, well, okay, if not that, then what? Like, what should I be doing? Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it makes. Do you know what? You're not the first person to say that. We get that a lot in the comments. Like, so what is your plan B, or what is your other option? And then some people ask about what was my own startup journey, which I don't really talk about. Give us another option. So
yeah, very, very rapidly. But then the hard thing is, then you'll end up talking to a layer of people who expect a lot from you and then there are plenty of people giving away great free insights and advice. It's not as tantalizing as the pay me $2,000 and I'll solve all your problems thing. For free, you can sit there on YouTube and watch Ray Dalio talk about how he built one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. You can have Richard Branson talking about how he started. You can have, these incredible real billionaires who put out great content every day for free. But there's something tantalizing about joining a group or joining a community or joining something that is like a structure or a thing. So there's this unmet need that's being met by Contrapreneurs. There needs to be something else that actually replaces that.
Cool. And are you still anything to do with Success Resources?
Well, I mean, no, I'm
just because they've banned me from their events. So if you can have a word with them and let me come to the next one, because honestly, I can't be asked wearing a disguise again.
I'm personally happy to speak. I enjoy, like, people have said to me, why would you speak there? It's like, because I like sharing my insights about entrepreneurship. And, I'm grateful to Success Resources for putting me in front of 1,000 people or 2,000 people, or, when they do. For me personally, it's a very clean operation. I turn up, I speak, I deliver a good talk. It gets well rated by the audience. It adds value to the overall conference. And I feel good because I really enjoy speaking in front of a big audience. It's pretty simple kind of thing. But I will say this, and I know that the leadership team at Success Resources, I actually think if they watched all of your videos and they really cataloged the points that you're making and they did something about that, they would have a much better business, People, if Success Resources was just a little more selective about who they put on stage, who was selling something and what they delivered for that, and just if they addressed some of the key concerns that you've raised in your videos, it would actually be almost like paying a leading consulting firm to give them a business plan as to what to do to 10x their business, right?
Right. I am going to say this, Daniel, right? So I put a video out. So Success Resources have actually got one of my videos removed, but I put a video out and they actually reached out to me and got in touch. And they said, look, you're obviously talented. You can put out good content. How do we stop you putting these videos out? How can we work together? And I said, listen, I'm not going to, if you want me to tell you face to face and I'll come in and tell you what I think is wrong with your business, I am open to do that with you. And then I didn't hear anything of them after that. But I was willing to say, this is what I think the problem is. And look, here's all the evidence I've got here of people that are willing to say these things. I think if they had any sense, they should really speak to me. And they've got the basis of a real good business there.
I used to have a mentor, a genuine mentor, like a real mentor, not just a photograph with a mentor. I used to have this mentor called Mike Harris. And Mike had built 3 multi-billion-pound businesses. He built egg credit cards. He built First Direct Bank, and he built Mercury Communications. Each was worth more than £1 billion. He was a really iconic CEO. He's written a great book called Find Your Light Bulb. But one of the big pieces of advice that he gave me while having pumpkin soup at a restaurant together was embrace the critics. He said, what you want to do is find not just the people who absolutely adore what you do, find the people who are critical of what you do, and take that as free consulting and actually, do something about it. If you can embrace the critics, you will actually solve a lot of the problems in your business. Or at least you might consciously choose not to address something because, that's a difference of opinion. But there are certain fundamental things that you raise in your videos. And if those issues were fixed, you would end up with a Success Resources that really catapults to a massive global business that people adore, people love, people rate highly. They have that capacity to do that. They clearly have an amazing team and a great drive. All of those things are there. But there are some poorly selected speakers and there are some poorly selected revenue streams that could easily be transferred.